Now, I'd like to introduce our representative for District 87, For Price.
Thank you, Dan. It is an honor to be here today and to look out and see a packed church with folks attending not just this forum, but the convention. Really want to thank the Color Guard and the scouts that were here this morning. That's outstanding work. And I really want to take a second to thank Chairman Rogers. Dan and the Executive Committee have done an outstanding job, not only putting this together, but if you haven't noticed, I'd be surprised at the amount of voter engagement, just citizen engagement, resident engagement, notifying you of every opportunity that we've got to attend functions, get out the vote rallies, candidate forums, everything that they have done. And I really tip my hat to Dan for creating a database of contacts that is being utilized as a model statewide. I know a lot of folks are looking at what you have done, Dan, and it's really effective. And so when you get emails and you get texts, they can be annoying from all these different groups that market their services to you, but pay attention to what Chairman Rogers is doing, because I don't think we would have the level of information and citizen engagement that we have right here at home but for Dan. So Dan, I want to give you a round of applause because I really appreciate what you're doing. I also want to thank, since back when I was first elected, we have had one thing in common here, which has been great leadership in our parties, both in Randall County and Potter County. And I represent Potter County, and Tom Roller was chairman of the party back when I was first elected, and he was followed by Tanya Detton and Bill Bandy and Dan Rogers, and I'm really grateful for that. And we've worked hand in glove with Tim and folks over in Randall County, and it's evident we have a special place that we live here in this area, and it's really like no other, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for all of you, those of you that are here today, those of you that have friends in our party that can't be here today. What a tremendous area of the state. You should be very proud. It is the envy of the rest of Texas for the Panhandle to be as solidly red and as solidly active as we are. Grateful for that. And that is where I have special gratitude for you that are here to participate in the convention, because as Tom just said, it is critical for what we do, not only at a local level, but then as the state convention is held in Houston next month, and then ultimately what goes into the Republican Party platform and what priorities are then debated and ultimately result in bills passed and laws made at the state level. It's also one fact y'all may know that it's a source of pride. The Texas State Convention is larger. The Texas State Republican Convention is larger than the Republican National Convention, which is held, which is amazing. So, I mean, we really have a ton to be proud of right here in Texas. And it is easy to get complacent when you live in an area like the Texas Panhandle and you think, well, I've always voted Republicans, my neighbors vote Republican, my parents vote Republican, we're all going to vote Republican. It's easy to get complacent when you think about what that looks like, and since we just, live in such a red area. But I'm encouraged by the fact there's so many people here today, and I know for weekend upon weekend for the last several weeks, there have been Republican county conventions all over Texas. And the reports that I receive are that the engagement level is extremely high, the turnout is very high, people are energized up and down the ballot, locally, statewide, federally for the president. We are seeing engagement in Texas like I've never seen before, and I think it's something that we all should be excited about. And one thing that I don't want this point to be lost on anybody, is what we saw in 2016 was amazing. And what we saw in 2016 from rural Texas, communities just like ours, put our friends over the top. So when I say our friends, when you look at who elected President Trump, when you look at who elected our statewide elected officials, the governor, the lieutenant governor, at that time Senator Cruz, and other statewide elected officials, it wasn't Dallas and Houston and San Antonio or Corpus Christi. It wasn't the big metropolitan areas across the state of Texas. It was Amarillo, Abilene, Midland, Odessa, Lubbock. It was these areas. And I'm really proud of that. And you know, statewide, I don't see us getting complacent either. But it is important that we encourage all of our neighbors and friends and coworkers and contacts to get out and vote. At the state level, Dan asked me to say a few words about what's going on, and certainly while the response at the state level right now has been COVID-19 driven, and it's taken priority, and it has certainly been front and center for so many agencies to work on. There's a lot of other work that is happening as we prepare for the 87th legislative session, which begins in January 2021. So right now, I really want everyone to know how hard, not only on COVID-19 response and reactions, but to also preparations for the 87th session, many of your state agencies are undertaking right now. I work every single day with the Texas Education Agency, with the Health and Human Services Commission, with the Department of State Health Services, with the Workforce Commission, with the Texas Division of Emergency Management. Chief Nim Kidd has done an incredible job because they have to battle not just what's going on with this global pandemic right here in Texas, but with wildfire relief, with hurricane disaster relief and preparedness, and so many other things at the very same time. They've done a wonderful job. But one area I want to give special recognition to is our state troopers with the Department of Public Safety. They have done an incredible job protecting your capital and staffing what has been an incredibly difficult situation there for the last several weeks. Several of my colleagues and I, in fact, 2 weeks ago, contributed thousands of dollars to have food trucks up there to feed our troopers because they were literally doing 12-hour shifts and sleeping on the granite floors of our Capitol in order to protect it from rioters and looters and people who were upset at a number of things and just glad to be upset at anything and go up there at the Capitol and destroy our great, beautiful Capitol. So if you see a DPS trooper, be sure and thank them, pat them on the back, let them know how proud of them you are, because they are incredible. One thing that we are doing as we prepare for the 87th session, which is very difficult for us to get together right now as committees and groups, is work on the issues we know we're going to have to deal with and will take priority when the session starts. Every session, the biggest issue is our state's budget. It is the only bill that has to pass during any legislative session. And thankfully in Texas, the budget has to balance. So I know that's not a novel concept to anybody in this room, but it is a novel concept to folks that don't live in Texas. And we have a constitutional amendment that requires it. So obviously we can't print money, but more importantly, we can't deficit spend. We cannot spend more money than we have. And in fact, we have 4 constitutional spending limits within the actual Constitution that requires us not to even get close. So we don't even spend the revenue that I guess we could spend that we have available to us as a state. But that budget drives every policy decision we have, and we know that the comptroller next month in July will come out and tell the state in his revised biennial revenue estimate that the Texas economy has slowed down and we will not have as much revenue in the next 2 years that we would have thought we might have, say 6 months ago at the beginning of 2020. So the Legislative Budget Board and the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee and the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committees are meeting every single day with state agencies and combing over the LAR requests, their legislative appropriations requests, asking them to tighten their belt, asking them to do what's necessary, just like any of us would, which is reduce your spending, figure out a way to make your agencies function without going to the taxpayers for more tax revenue. And in fact, what you will see is that exact thing happen in the next session. Texas will balance its budget, but it won't do it by raising a tax. Because in fact, what you remember is we passed and you all approved through constitutional amendment, we cannot create a state income tax in the state of Texas forever based on our Constitution. So you won't see that. What you will see in all likelihood is a combination, a use of many tools to balance the budget so that you provide an adequate source of funding to meet the state's needs and priorities. And that will include changing of timing on payments, deferral of payments so that it can be accounted for in different periods. You may see the use of some of the Economic Stabilization Fund, not for recurring expenses, but for one-time expense areas that will smooth out our state's economy. That's what it's for. You may see other areas of the federal government providing access to funds to help COVID expenses and other things which we will utilize. And then you will see reduced agency spending across the board. But what that will do is really focus the state's efforts on our priorities, which historically have been in the areas of public and higher education, in healthcare, in infrastructure, and in public safety, which includes border security. We spend more money than all the other states combined on securing our border. And that is not going to change. We will see that focus on infrastructure for a couple of reasons. One is state of Texas is kind of a victim of its own success. We have 29.6 million people living in the state of Texas today. And largely that's because we are an attractive place to be. We are the best state in our entire country to live, work, and raise a family. And it's been that way for a while. And we have seen tremendous migration to the state of Texas over the last decade. You all know that the census occurs every 10 years, and it's ongoing right now. And that leads me to the other item I just wanted to talk about, saying every 10 years, when the census is conducted, the state goes through legislative redistricting. We redraw the districts and the maps for the judicial districts, the State Board of Education, congressional districts, as well as state house and state senate districts. It's a very, very important process, and I am privileged to serve on the state's House Committee on Redistricting, where we were traveling the state to hold 28 hearings statewide to get feedback from constituents in every part of Texas so we could draw those maps in a way that met the Voting Rights Act requirements, but gave us the best representation and best maps available. That committee was scheduled to meet right here in Amarillo. I worked hard to get it done for an April hearing last year. Obviously, in April, we could not have that hearing in the Panhandle, but I'm working hard as soon as restrictions are lifted to get that committee back here. Because it's important. It's important that our voice at that level not be diluted. And it's important because congressionally, we are going to pick up a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 4 seats because of the great population expanse in the state of Texas. We're getting folks from the West Coast. We're getting folks from the East Coast. We're getting folks from the Midwest. People want to move here. I had an email just this morning from a real estate and tech company that operates on the West Coast that said, I can't take it anymore. My tax environment's too high. The regulatory environment's too strict. I'm moving to Texas, and I'm doing it not just for myself, but to include benefits for my employees that we can't currently provide to our employees now. And so that is a huge, huge issue that we will deal with next session. Now, the kicker on that, and the one thing I want to make sure everybody is aware of, is the Census Bureau has been petitioning Congress and letting them know that they can't finish their job on time because of the shutdown in our economy and their inability to go door to door in all 50 states. And that may well be the case. It is difficult for them to get their job done. Normally, they would have that information to the state by April 1st, which would give us about 6 weeks to finish our map drawing process in all those different areas and the apportionment process for congressional districts. But now it looks like that information may not be available until July of 2021. And so we would normally have finished our session by that period of time. So if that's the case, the governor will have to call us back into a special session in order to take up that map drawing process. So it will be extremely critical during the next session if you are able, whether it's virtually or in person, to testify, make your viewpoints known about the importance of communities of interest that live here in the Panhandle and work here in the Panhandle, because I want to make sure that as those districts are redrawn in all of those different areas, that we have adequate and proper representation. and expect that to happen late. I don't know. I'll be surprised if it happens any earlier than that, but expect that to happen in a special session next summer. Now, I want to move on real quickly to politics and the elections that are upcoming, because I think that's important. Obviously, things are getting intense within our party right now with runoff elections, if you just heard from some of the candidates, and we'll hear from some of the candidates. And that will be over with here in a few weeks, and then what we will see is, I hope, a marshaling of our teams to defeat the Democrats in November, top to bottom. Those polls that come out, yes, give your, that. There are a lot of polls and a lot of information that comes out about this time during elections, and we'll see it again happen in the fall after the summer, close to the elections in November. Lots of information, a lot of misinformation, a lot of things that get said that aren't true, a lot of polls that are skewed, sometimes purposefully, sometimes not purposefully, sometimes they're just not conducted well. But I saw a poll the other day that had Joe Biden 14 points ahead of President Trump. And I reminded, somebody asked me about that, and they said, oh, I'm very concerned about that. And I said, well, I can remember about this exact same time in 2016, Hillary Clinton was 14 points above Donald Trump. And look what happened there. And then I said, up until, and I literally think it was 48 hours, maybe 24 hours before the general election, there wasn't a single poll that had him winning, except for one. And so I would take polling with a little bit of a grain of salt and just continue to be vigilant and active and understand that there's a lot of politics that goes on and a lot of things that are said that aren't necessarily accurate. And that top of the ticket will be strong. It will be very, very strong. And it'll be strong in Texas. We have a U.S. Senate race at the top of the ticket. Obviously, we have a congressional race here locally, 13th District, and that will bring out a lot of people. Statewide, we don't have a lot of change going on in statewide elected officials. This is not a cycle where the governor or lieutenant governor are on the ballot. We don't have any turnover really to speak of going on in the Texas Senate. All the focus is going to be on the Texas House. We have a very slim majority of Republicans in the House. When I was first elected, we had 98. We built it up to 102. Last session, we lost 12 seats to the Democrats statewide and now have 83. So it is 83 to 67. And while that doesn't sound that close, that's only a 9-seat delta to have 76, which is the number needed to have a majority. Only 9 seats statewide, so 9 out of 150 statewide to have a majority. And why is that important? For obvious reasons. The majority will pick the speaker. The majority will influence the legislative agenda, and the majority will determine who is on what committee and what their assignments is. And as importantly as any of that, the majority will be in power when we redistrict and draw maps for Congress, for the judiciary, for the SBOE, and for the State House and State Senate. So as I mentioned redistricting being important, it is important to elect Republicans to the Texas House this cycle more than ever. And so for those of us that don't have general election opponents, we have been working since before the last session ended to help our colleagues in competitive districts. There are 23 competitive races in the House. We run every other year. And so the races are very, very close to the people who vote for those representatives in those communities. And there are 23 out of 150 that I think on paper are very competitive, meaning the Republican candidate underperformed a down-ballot Republican in the last election or underperformed Governor Abbott or President Trump within their own districts. So we are trying to help them raise their profile, get their message out, and work on their behalf in all 23 of those seats. And we are raising money and establishing our own efforts to get their message out and assist them in traveling the state. And we're going to work hard because as goes Texas, so goes our entire country. I really believe that. I don't think you will see anybody be a better leader for our country than the state of Texas. We're going to keep Texas red. Frankly, we're going to keep Texas, Texas. So it is not all doom and gloom. It's tough in these environments to get, obviously, wrapped around the axle on pandemics and economies, and I mean, it's all important, but Texas remains a very powerful force in our country. We are looking at registering, as of day before yesterday, we have in the bank 100,000 new Republican voters registered statewide, and that's due to a very strong effort by our party. We're outperforming all the other states in just about every economic indicator area you can think of. We still remain the 10th largest economy on planet Earth. If we were our own country, we'd still have the 10th largest economy. We have the largest rainy day fund of any state in the country. And we will retain control of the legislature, the legislative branch. We will retain control of the executive branch. We will contain control of all the statewide offices. We haven't elected the Democrats since 1994, over a quarter of a century. We will continue that trend, which means we will continue to support our law enforcement. We'll continue to support the rule of law. We will continue to support the sanctity of life, the Second Amendment, the strong fiscal policies that have made Texas a leader for our country, the protection of our private property rights, and the promotion of small business and individual accountability and individual responsibility. I want to thank you again. It's been a real honor to be here, and just like I said, I'm really encouraged that we have such great turnout, because it makes me know that we're going to be successful, not just here in a few weeks within our party, but in November when we're battling the real enemy of politics today. Your presence and work here today and everything that you're doing is extremely important to this whole process, and together we will keep Texas red. It's a privilege to serve you in the Texas House of Representatives, and I ask that God bless each of you in our great state. Thank you.